Welcome everyone to this morning's session on impact of COVID on mental and emotional health. My name is Dave Carvalho and I work with the Office of Faith Formation here in the Diocese of Fall River. I'm happy to welcome all of you as you log on and others continue to log on as well. I'm very happy to be joined today by Andrew Walsh, a therapist, writer, and researcher and public speaker. Andrew works for the Family Addiction Center in New Jersey, and he published his first book on video game addiction in 2019. His focus today on the talk is going to be looking at the impact of emotional and mental health as it relates to COVID in young people, primarily focusing on helping parents, community members, and church leaders with information on how to help young people as we continue through a kind of a COVID world. So without further ado, I will bring Andrew on screen. Andrew, how are you doing?
I am well today. Looking forward to this.
Good. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here. So Andrew, I will leave the screen. I will throw it over to you and I will let you lead us today.
Sure. Thanks, David. So hello, everyone. I am very happy to be with you today. As David mentioned, I do a bunch of different things, but this happens to be my favorite thing, which is to do presentations and connect with a variety of audience members from diverse backgrounds. Since we do have a smaller group today, I want everyone, or anyone that's comfortable with it at least, to just buzz in what your name is and what you're hoping to get out of today. Because I have a lot of information, but I want to make sure that you all walk away with exactly what you want to get out of it. So whoever wants to
use the
share, more than welcome to.
the measuring.
I got a.
I've also been known to call on people. So.
I'm Elizabeth Tywell. I'm a social worker here at the Fall River Boys and Girls Club.
Okay.
And I guess I'm just looking for an opportunity to hear just generally what the consensus or the research is showing about some of the impacts of, I guess, mental health during the COVID pandemic. Working with children, I focus a lot on them and their needs and what they're experiencing, and sometimes need some more information about what the adult experience is like besides my own.
Sure.
So thank you.
All right, Elizabeth, I was actually going to call on you, so I'm glad that you buzzed in, because the person that I was going to go to next just smiled and goes by the name, it looks like, of Lisa Johnson.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, Lisa, how you doing?
Okay, perfect. So my name's Lisa Johnson, and I'm the confirmation coordinator at St. John Newman Parish in East Freetown.
Okay.
And basically, I'm hoping to get some tips for working with teens that are going through what the rest of us are going through with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We have been remote up to this point, but I know that, back and forth with emails with parents, there have been different issues. We've had a couple of kids that have actually hit the pause button for us and are going to be coming back next year because they're just so overwhelmed with everything that's going on.
Sure. Okay. Confirmation coordinator. We've been remote. Some kids are hitting the pause button, which is definitely interesting. Tools, techniques, et cetera, to try and corral them and keep them progressing forward.
Exactly.
Okay. Very good. Lisa, happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
I see Kathleen smiling up there. I see you. Oh, there she is.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hi. Thank you for offering this. So I'm the youth minister and the director of religious education at Christ the King Parish in Mashpee. So
Okay.
I work with children and families, grades 1 through 12, actually.
Oof.
So I'm noticing in particular the youth group kids, many of which are seniors in high school. And the past 2 years have been a lot of loss. as we know, normalcy, but their traditions, the things they had looked forward to, prom, college tours. I mean, just things that normally would have been, they had been waiting for. So while these young people are very positive generally,
Sure.
there's a lot of loss there. And so how to process, and even some adults I've been working with, they haven't been able to name it. But when I name it and I say, well, we're grieving, there's a grief period here, then they think, oh, okay, you're right. I haven't. So how to help the grieving and just processing this past year with them, with how to focus people on how to move past it, move forward. And knowing that, I think the other conversation we've had was when this first started, it was, okay, we'll be closed up for about a month and we'll be back to normal. And I think people are realizing there is no normal, there's no going back, I guess. And how do we go forward with, we're all changed and in a new, in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, youth group. I took, I guess it's 2 summers ago, 15 of the youth group members from my local church over to Europe for 2 weeks. And they were between the ages of 14 and 18. So I got to spend 2 weeks with them, Miyagi-ing them, which is, I'm someone that's between their age and their parents' age. So a mom nature, and then I take them out for walks and just put them at ease. And then I just right in, and they don't even see it coming. So I love youth groups. Definitely some inherent challenges with the grades that you're covering, 1 through 12. Oof, that covers the spectrum. Yeah, and grief. The grief.
Well, and then the other part, I would say for the younger grades, because we have done our program entirely remote this year. So there's been digital programs as well as we've done a lot of Zoom. And kind of that Zoom fatigue for families. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good to have you here with us today, Kathleen.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump into a slide deck. I'm very informal. So if you have a question, if you have a comment, if you feel some sort of way at some sort of point, take yourself off mute, jump in. I'm here to be a resource. I am the person that goes and does all of this research and then applies it. And then I give everyone that I talk to the cliff notes so that y'all don't have to spend as much time as I did to get the information. All right, let's do this. Okay, David already did this. I do a bunch of different things. It's not because I'm special, it's because I don't have the stomach to just stick to one thing at a time. And what I find is by doing all of these things, it informs all of the work that I do. And so my research informs my writing, practice, my public speaking, and everything builds on itself. Question right out of the gate. Anybody concerned about the impact of the pandemic on mental health? Okay, I see a couple of heads nodding. Right, so then my work here is done. Yes, there's been an impact. It seems like everyone here is aware of it. And so we can go forth and get out early with good behavior. Let's see here. So we're going to talk about youth, but while I have a bunch of adults with me, I also want to touch on them. This is what it looks like for adults. Adults as defined as over the age of 25. So 25 and above. 41% of adults in the United States over the age of 25 report depression symptoms or anxiety symptoms. So that's astronomically high. That's actually a 400% increase pre-pandemic. 13% report new or increase in substance use. And in certain states, we have seen that liquor sales, for instance, have increased by 50%. 1 in 4 workers admits that they drink during the course of the workday at this point while they're working, because they're not in the office, they're at their home and they're able to do it. It helps pass the time. The issue with it is that once you do it enough, you develop that physiological addiction to it. So substance use disorder rates, addiction rates have gone up, and then we're really going to see the impact of that once the pandemic really starts to wind down and we have a whole new generation of alcoholics and drug addicts that we didn't have before. This last one blew my mind. So 1 out of 10 adults over the age of 25 have reported that they have had suicidal thoughts in the past 30 days. When I came across these numbers, I said, wow, this is absolutely horrific. It can't get any worse than this. This is the worst numbers I've ever seen. And then I looked at the young adults. 56% depression or anxiety symptoms. Again, it was 41% for adults, which was astronomical in my mind. It's actually 56%. So nearly 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5. So if you have a youth group with 15 people in it, 9 of them statistically are experiencing depression symptoms and or anxiety symptoms. 25% report substance use. So from a neurological development perspective, the last region of our brain to finish developing is the prefrontal cortex, right here. That is the region of the brain that is associated with executive functioning, logical analysis. One of the first regions of the brain to develop, reward center, Mesolimbic dopamine pathway. The name doesn't matter, but when you think about kids, and these stats are for 18 to 24, but I know at least some of you have already mentioned you're working with kids as young as first grade. Kids are like really fast cars with terrible brakes. The reward center is developed from an early age, so they seek to maximize pleasure. The prefrontal cortex is like the brakes. It's where you're able to take that step back and say, maybe I shouldn't do this. This might not be the safest thing to do. A lot of kids don't talk about having fear in situations that adults are very fearful for their kids in. And the reason is not that they are ignoring their fear, it's that it doesn't register to them. Really fast car, terrible brakes. So when we look at this next stat, where 25% of them are reporting substance use at this point, the earlier that you start with alcohol or drugs, the greater likelihood there is of developing addiction. So if I took somebody that was 50 years old and put them on a regimen of smoking marijuana every day for 6 months, their cognitive functioning would decrease. If I then stop them for 3 months, they'll return back to where they were before. I take a 15-year-old, put them on that daily marijuana maintenance plan, 6 months, and then stop for 3 months, they don't return back to where they were. Because their brain is still developing, it's this concept of neuroplasticity, the changes that they experience do not revert back to the baseline. Their brains actually change. And so that is one of the factors that really increases the likelihood of addiction. If you start young, you train your brain to look for it. And now I've got 1 out of 4 kids that are using alcohol or drugs. Not good. And then this last one is just horrific. 26% of them are reporting suicidal thoughts. So if we went into a room and we had 100 18 to 24-year-olds in there, a quarter of them would have experienced suicidal thoughts in the past 30 days. So this is all post the initiation of the pandemic. It was about 5 months into it that we looked at these stats and collected them. So clearly there's been a significant spike. Again, for adults, 400% increase in depression or anxiety symptoms. All of these are spikes that have occurred from the pandemic. So that's usually the first spot that people start to get a little bit of a glimmer of hope. Okay, well, the pandemic's going to come to an end. We're going to return to normal. And these numbers should go down. And they probably will. The issue is, even if they return to their pre-pandemic levels, they're much higher than most people realize. It's not even close. So I'm going to focus predominantly on the youth and young adult population today, but I've got a lot of information on all sorts of age demographics. One of the areas that we're going to look at pretty in depth is social media. Anybody have concerns about social media and the impact it has on youth? I see Elizabeth bobbing like a bobblehead over there. I see you, Lisa, you're going with it too. Well, I wrote a book on video game addiction. And in the course of that research, I became quite proficient in social media as well, how it's designed. And really the way it's designed is these companies hire people like me to win kids, to get their attention. The product that's for sale is not the social media, it's actually the attention of the kids. And so we're going to look at what that research actually looks like. Is there actual cause for concern about social media? Yes, significant concern, but we'll break it down and look at the different areas of life that are impacted by it. And then we're going to wrap up with techniques that we can use in the research behind it to help right now with the pandemic, and then also to help combat what was already occurring before the pandemic. If we return back to where we were before the pandemic, we are in so much trouble. We can't go back to where we were. We need to dramatically decrease it in regards to mental and emotional health, the rates. So we'll look at all of that stuff. So I started out in this field actually in traditional substance use disorder, detox and rehab. And I really actually enjoyed it. I had my alcoholics, I had my heroin addicts, and I spent a lot of time with them, worked with them pretty extensively. And so the first time that I saw this picture, I thought it was a bit much. I mean, I was coming from working with people that are using heroin on a daily basis and injecting it just like this picture. So I said, social media, that is an aggressive picture. It can't be that bad. And I decided to look at it just to access my ignorance, just to make sure. There's different types of platforms. I really actually didn't know much about it. I thought I did because I was like, I remember MySpace. I remember Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I've never really messed with any of these though, because I got rid of all of my social media 11 years ago. I just felt something was off about it. And I realized that it was a negative in my life. So I got rid of all of it. And then I just never looked at it again until the past 2 years. So there's different types. So we have social networking, which would be Facebook, LinkedIn, microblogging, Twitter, Tumblr. The number one reason that people use Tumblr was actually for porn, and then Tumblr banned that, and the membership of Tumblr decreased by 50%. So that was an interesting stat I came across. Photo sharing. So the big one would be, dependent on age, Instagram for youth and young adult females, Snapchat, predominantly favored by youth and young adult males. Pinterest is going to be people that are our age, who like to do different projects, et cetera, and come up with different boards for inspiration. Most people don't think about YouTube as social media. It absolutely is. And then Facebook Live, which has got its own inherent issues. So there's different types of platforms. All right, time to go back to the audience. What do people believe about social media? I need at least 2, no more than 3 answers on people's perceptions about social media's concerns, et cetera.
Hi, for me, it's the living out loud and getting to know too much about someone, which then I think it just creates a poison that can't be remedied. That's one of my biggest concerns. It's like, use it for what you need, but live your life on your own. Don't live it out loud. And that's one of the biggest things with me with social media is that it's so damning for people.
Yes, I like that. Living your life out loud. I'm going to put that into the back of my mind and use it in the future. It is. Absolutely. Thank you, Rosemary.
So this Lisa, social media, I mean, I'm going to be 60, so my daughter calls me technologically challenged a lot, but from what I've seen of social media outside of my job, it feels like a lot of people are putting up what they want you to think their life is.
Ooh.
And I think a lot of younger people look at that and believe that that is what the person's life is and don't think about, you know, what's behind it. So that's always been a concern for me, both for my daughter and for the kids that I work with.
Sure. Lisa, I'm glad you made that point. I call it duck syndrome. And so it's when you look at a duck on the pond, it seems to effortlessly glide across the water. But if you look underneath the water line, the feet are furiously paddling. And this has happened twice, actually, that one of my clients said something nearly identical to you. I had we were in Poland. We started in Poland with the youth group. And I had this 17-year-old male go for a walk with me. A very nice young man. He was articulate. He was intelligent. He was in this honors program at his high school. He just got into his dream college, and he got a full ride, academic ride to that college. And so on paper, his life looked great. And he said the issue for him was that every time that he went online, it looked like his friends were having the best day of their life every single day. And he was wondering, what's wrong with me? And so an issue that happens is for the youth and young adult population, they very much struggle to not engage in comparing how they feel to what they see. So they walk around in their mind, thinking about themselves, the inadequacy, the insecurities, etc. And then they compare it to what they see projected from other people. And they're missing the point that what they're seeing from other people might actually not be a reflection of reality. And so inherently, they lose in the majority of those comparisons and feel worse and worse about themselves. So spot on. Very good, Lisa. All right, that was two. We'll move.
I also, I feel like
okay.
Social media reminds me a lot of road rage too, in some ways, where people who are driving behind a vehicle are more inclined to be obnoxious because they're secure in their own vehicle than they would be in person with someone. And social media seems to allow for that too. You have people who will just say the most unkind things in social media that they wouldn't say to someone's face. And so it becomes that, to me, it aligns a lot with like that road rage mentality.
You're talking about the keyboard warriors, people that just go around and assassinate other people online, and they would never have the courage to do it to somebody else, to that person's face. We do see that with bullying as well. It used to be traditionally bullying. It would occur at school, then you would go home and get a reprieve from it. Now it's 24 hours a day. And you can do more damage to somebody online in 30 minutes than you probably ever could do in person. You can decimate somebody's persona, their reputation. Absolutely. Thanks, Kathleen. All right, so I became interested when I was writing about video game addiction. The only reason I haven't written a book on social media is because I am too scared about being sued. Because I am the ultimate little David here, and it would be going against companies that have, multi-billion-dollar valuations. And so that is just a fight that I have not found the courage to pursue. And so I do it underneath the radar by doing what I'm doing with y'all today. So I just saw when I was doing my deep dive into video games, how the design of social media was identical. And actually, most of the people that are executives at this point at social media companies, and in fact, some of the people that created some of these social media companies went to the same school and participated in the same lab with the people who are head of video game designs. And so they all studied under this individual. His name is BJ Fogg. He's out of Stanford. He's called the Millionaire Maker. And that's because his students have gone on to become executives at all of these companies or to create the companies. Like one of his students is one of the co-creators of Instagram. Instagram, by the way, decimates the youth and young adult female population. Absolutely decimates them. It's horrific what happens with that. And so that's when I became interested in social media, when I saw the design was the same and it could all be traced back to one individual. BJ Fogg out of Stanford. So this is just some headlines I grabbed out of the news. Problematic for adolescents from the New York Times. Quit an Instagram. This was a really good article from the Washington Post. This is about one of the first 10 employees of Instagram who ended up leaving Instagram because she could no longer stomach the changes that were occurring and how Instagram is being deployed as a business model. And one of the co-creators of Instagram also left and said, I can't agree with the path that this company is pursuing at this point. And it wasn't about business necessarily, it was about morality. It was about the manipulation of the users. And I'm going to talk about that. Association of Screen Time and Depression in Adolescents. This is from a scientific journal. Screen time is a real issue. We have a number of studies that look at that and the impact that it has. So we'll dig into this stuff. Teens. So when I talk to an audience like the one that I have with me here today, when I ask about social media, one of the first things they think about is Facebook. And yes, Facebook is the most popular platform for people over the age of 35. Not under. YouTube is by far the most popular. Instagram is for girls in popularity. Snapchat, it's more popular for boys. Facebook is a distant fourth. Twitter is going to be predominantly males. Reddit's going to be predominantly males. Tumblr is not necessarily for too many people now that they got rid of porn on it. But it used to be very popular. This is what they use most often. Again, Snapchat, girls. YouTube, everybody. I'm sorry, Snapchat is boys. Instagram is girls, and it's not even close. And then Facebook, if you're over the age of 35, absolutely. So we actually did some research on this. We asked youth, hey, what's your experience with your social media usage? Do you have a positive experience, a negative experience, or a neutral experience? So the first stat is actually a giant warning flag. 31% of them reported a mostly positive experience. The reason that's a warning sign to me is that means 69% report either a negative or a neutral experience. So 3 out of 10 have a good experience. That's not good. I would feel much more comfortable if that number was in the high 80s or 90s. But why do they like it? Well, they connect with friends, theoretically. Anybody concerned about the erosion of social skills, of that in-person interaction, the ability to engage in conversation with somebody that's actually with you? Yeah, me too. So I go out to dinner with my parents every Friday night for the most part, and we go to the diner, and just who I am at this point, I've become so trained that I struggle to turn it off. And so I'm always looking around and observing people. And I'm wondering if you all have had this experience. You ever look at a different table or at a group of youth and they're all together and none of them are talking in person, but they're all talking via their phones? Okay, so I'm not the only one that's seen that. My favorite, I think David heard this one before, was when I looked at probably a 16-year-old male, 16-year-old female, clearly on a date at the diner directly across from the high school that I went to. You know, a little nostalgia to be young. Oh, it's a little bit, maybe even jealous of the youth, the life ahead of them. And I just thought it was so strange. I'm like, well, they're not talking much, but maybe they're anxious. First date. But then I realized, oh my God, they're messaging each other. You've got somebody directly across the table from you, but you're using text messaging, Snapchat, Instagram, a social media platform to communicate with that person. Why not just communicate with the person that's like right there with you? So that was an interesting experience for me. And I've seen it so many times since then. You know, I see a group, a traveling soccer team that's out to dinner, and they're waiting to get seated at the restaurant, and they're all sitting outside on the benches next to each other, messaging each other, communicating with each other, but just not actually talking to each other. So what I call soft skills, gone.
Can I share a story?
Contact. Please, Kathleen, please.
Our daughter was in college. She was a junior. And one night I got a phone call from her and she was in panic. And she had been texting this, this guy in college and that she had met. And they had just been texting back and forth. And she called me in panic and said, "Mom, he said he wants to call me. What do I do?"
Oh my God.
She was like, what do you think he wants? She was in total panic that it was going to move from texting to voice to actually speaking. And is this guy a creep, Mom? Why does he want to call me? And this, sadly, she's not unique in this.
I like that story. I'm going to talk.
Of course, my answer was, he's a keeper, Ashley. Let him call you.
Gentleman wants to talk to the young lady on the phone. And her reaction is panic, anxiety, uncertainty about what to do. And it seems like this guy's different. He wants to call me. He must be a creep. So relationships, totally gone at this point. And they could have, 500 friends online, but if you ask them really to be honest about who can you go to if you've got a real problem, if you're really struggling with something, that number dramatically decreases. In my experience, it usually goes to either 1 or 0. And so it's an issue, a significant issue. This last quote's really interesting. I think I feel like social media can make people my age feel less lonely. It actually has the opposite effect of that, but it's a perception. So there's perception and reality. I perceive that this might be a tool, a mechanism to decrease loneliness, when in reality, it actually dramatically increases loneliness. I got a good story on that one, which I'll get you with in a bit. All right, so negative, 1 out of 4. So 1 out of 4 users report a mostly negative experience. It makes it harder for people to socialize in real life. Kathleen's daughter thought this guy was a creep because he just wanted to call her to chat. It was a natural next step in progression of getting to know somebody. They can't communicate. It's really not good. Emotional insight, gone. Emotional articulation, which is to be able to talk about the emotions that you're experiencing, gone. Vulnerability, non-existent. Like, they don't talk about this stuff. They don't connect with other people. It's all superficial for the most part. I like this last quote. It provides a fake image of someone's life. Well, isn't that the truth? The way I think about it, most people don't go online and post the lowlights of their life. They go with the highlights. Even a normal day, they throw filters on it to make it look like it's something special. It's not real. But most people on social media don't engage in real depictions of their life because they're comparing their life to everybody else's life. So 1 out of 4 say, I have a negative experience with it. I decided next to look at how much time do they actually spend online. This is not for school, by the way. This is online via a mobile device, so a cell phone, a tablet, or a computer for social media and video games combined. Again, not school, entertainment. 13 to 14, they spend 6.5 hours. 15 to 16, 7.5 hours. And my 17 and 18-year-olds, my juniors and seniors in high school, spent 9 hours a day on this stuff. that seem like a lot of time to anybody? Yeah, I mean, if we extrapolate that across a 7-day week, that would be 63 hours for my high school students. So these rates are going to come into play in a couple of minutes when we look at what it should actually be. And you're going to see this night and day discrepancy between what is and what should be. So they spend way too much time on. Anybody remember the Tobacco Commission? This was like a big thing. And the reason it was big was this is when we had executives from the 10 largest tobacco companies in the United States go before Congress to testify. And for decades before this, medical studies had started to come out that linked tobacco use with adverse physical reactions, cancer, hypertension, COPD, etc. And the tobacco industry denied that. They funded their own studies that said there's no link between tobacco use and adverse physical reactions. So it all came to a head though in 1994. It was on C-SPAN, actually, of all things. And they were asked a bunch of questions, but 3 questions stood out when I went back and looked at it. Do you smoke? Would you let your family smoke? Is smoking healthy? Only one of them was a smoker. None of them would let their family members smoke. All of them said smoking is perfectly healthy. So to summarize that, I don't do it. I won't let my family do it, but it's perfectly safe. Now we know that's not true. It's irrefutable at this point, the link. We're starting to see the same thing from social media executives. I feel tremendous guilt. I think we created tools that are ripping apart the social fabric of how society works. This is a person that used to be in charge of the growth for Facebook. I said, okay, maybe that's just one person. Social media literally changes your relationship with society, with each other. It probably interferes with productivity in weird ways. God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. That's Sean Parker. He was the former president of Facebook. I have a whole list of them. I cut out most of the slides to make this something that we could get through quickly. This is what it looks like. The age to get a cell phone has decreased. It's about 13 years old at this point. In certain areas, it's actually as young as 10 to 11. Interestingly enough, out in Silicon Valley, the people that work at these companies, the creators of these companies, the average age is actually closer to 18 years old. We've integrated technology into the classroom. And this was before the pandemic, and now we've gone full bore into it. We called that progress. Could be. It's just an interesting point that, again, the people that created this stuff send their kids to low tech or no tech schools. Steve Jobs, Apple, wouldn't let his daughter use an iPad. So I won't let my kids use it. I send them to schools that don't use it. I don't allow it in my house, but it's totally safe. It's eerily reminiscent of this. And we do have a number of the executives at this point that have left the companies and spoken out against the tools, platforms that they've created. So when we look at emotional behavioral health for youth and young adults, there's a couple of measures that we look at. We look at depression, anxiety, loneliness, sleep, suicidal thoughts, self-injurious behavior, suicide attempts, successful suicides. All right, before 2008, it was all going down. Since 2008, it has gone up every single year. What happened in 2008? I suspect all of you have one of these. David's holding it up. 2008, the first iPhone was released. And all of a sudden, kids could go anywhere at any time and have access to anything that they wanted. The iPhone was the first supercomputer that was basically mobile. Before that, we had the BlackBerry, and we actually had a different name for it. We called it the Crackberry, because you would have people walking around on their BlackBerry nonstop. The iPhone was different, though. That was like a cultural revolution at that point. And since then, we're on like our 10th iteration of it. The majority of people have smartphones at this point. An interesting stat is, in the world, more people have smartphones than access to indoor plumbing. And it's not even close. There's about 1.5 billion difference between those two. So more people have a smartphone than an indoor toilet. When we look at the United States, the number's about 94% of youth at this point either have one or have access to one. So those numbers have gone up every single year since 2008. And it's just not the phone. It's not the phone's fault inherently. The phone gave them access to, constant access to social media. So sleep, depression, loneliness, self-esteem, anxiety, suicide attempts, all of that has gotten way worse. This is great. So anytime that I work with a client, anything that they present with, I have never seen it made better by lack of sleep. If you're having struggles, if you're having difficulties, challenges, I have never seen those become better when you become sleep deprived. We look at high school students, 87% of them get way less sleep than they need. Now, part of that is their sleep cycle changes, and our schools don't adjust for that. High school students should not be going to school at 7:30 in the morning. They should be going to school at 9:30, but we don't do that. We send them in too early. But also part of the issue is the fact that kids aren't so good at putting themselves to sleep at night. So one of the first interventions that I do with families, I do a ton of family work. I'm like, get the devices out of the bedroom. When I just look at the odds of, let's say, a 13-year-old going into a bedroom with a smart device and being like, all right, it's 9:30, I should get off of this. I should do some reading, maybe some meditation, some light yoga, get myself ready to go to sleep. I don't have the greatest degree of confidence that that's going to occur. I have almost no confidence that's going to occur for a 16-year-old. So remember, kids, fast cars, terrible brakes. When I work with families, I encourage the parents, get it out of the bedroom because your child is going to maximize pleasure. i.e. they're going to engage in continuing to use this, and it disrupts their sleep cycle. I'm horrified at the fact that 40% of kids go to sleep with their phones actually on, like the ringer's on. And I ask them why. For my group of kids that go to sleep with their phone under their pillow, and I ask them the same question, why? And they say, so it's that they can respond to somebody if somebody messages them. And it makes me wonder, how important is it to respond to somebody at 3 a.m.? They're just on it all the time. Average American keeps their phone either on their body or within 3 feet of their body 97% of the day. And that's 24 hours. That's not waking hours. 97% of the 24 hours in a day, it's either on them or within 3 feet of them. So a big issue for kids is that they're on social media or video games when they should be winding down and or sleeping at nighttime. They also don't get enough sleep because 40% of them get woken up throughout the course of the night to then respond to somebody. So they're not getting into the circadian rhythm, the deep REM cycle that they need to feel rested. And sleep deficit is not made up over the course of a weekend. You can't sleep deprive yourself for 5 days and then make it up over the course of 2 days and then repeat that for 40 weeks of the year. It doesn't work that way. It builds up, and as long as it takes to build up is about as long as it takes for it to go away. So when we look at their functioning, diminished, 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 diminished. Oh, body image, not on. Let me tell you about this one. This is why it's dangerous for kids to spend so much time on social media. It's also just as bad for adults, by the way. When I look at my women, 87% of them compare their bodies to images that they consume on social media. Now, 92% of the time that they do these comparisons, they engage in what I call upward comparisons. That's my 13-year-old perfectly healthy client that I'm working with who's comparing her body to one of the Kardashians. Or my really fit, athletic 15-year-old male, because 65% of them do this too, who's comparing himself to a professional model. So the way to look at this, about 90% of the time that women go online, they walk away feeling worse about themselves, about their body image. This is why we have seen such a spike in eating disorders, self-injurious behavior, depression, anxiety. And imagine doing that for 8 hours a day. This is not like they do it for 15 minutes. They subject themselves to hours of this. Not good. Depression. Ooh, la la. All right, decreased social skills, we talked about that. They do not do a good job of connecting with each other at this point. Cyberbullying, big issue. Again, you used to be able to go home and it would take, you get a reprieve from it. Now it's relentless. And then it's like, yes, the road rage people. It is so intense at this point at a much heightened level because we do have so many keyboard warriors out there saying stuff that they would never say in person. Pressure to fit in. And this is where people usually post the good moments, but not the real ones, and certainly not the bad ones. So what does this actually look like? Well, in teen girls, we studied this in the UK in 2018. Massive sample size, 11,000 girls. Teen girls are twice as likely to show depressive symptoms linked to social media compared to boys. And it's not like, oh, boys are at 3% and girls are at 6%. Nope. Boys are in the 20-ish% range, girls are in the mid 40s. So nearly half of the girls, depressive symptoms from social media usage. Not good. Young adults, because I have a ton of college students that I work with, love that population. It's like they have developed enough that they can articulate and engage in some introspection. They're very interested when they're in college. We studied this over at UPenn also in 2018, and we looked at Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. And the study was very simple. Two groups. One group, continue to use it as you use it. The other group, you get 30 minutes or less for the day. And so this was interesting for two reasons. One, depression symptoms dramatically decreased for those that were at the 30 minutes or less. There was no intervention besides that. There was no therapy. They were not talking to me. They were not talking to other counselors. There was no group therapy. Absolutely nothing, just 30 minutes or less. Then there was the group that actually came in with a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. So they weren't just showing symptoms. They actually were suffering from clinical depression. No intervention. If they're in the group that was 30 minutes or less, the severity of their depression dramatically decreased. So 30 minutes or less is the key number. The issue, well, if you're 7 to 18, you're at 9 to 9.5 hours a day. If you're 13 to 14, you're at 6 to 6.5 hours a day. The sweet spot, 30 minutes or less. What are we, 20 times that if you're in high school as a junior or senior? And the issue, again, you spend that much time online, you do this, upward comparison, subjecting yourself to hours every single day about how you are not good enough. Inadequate. And when I ask my clients, okay, well, what's the inadequacy? I'm not smart enough, I'm not good looking enough, I'm not popular enough, I'm not athletic enough. et cetera, et cetera. For my young professionals who I work with extensively, I'm not successful enough. I don't make enough money. I don't have the most interest in life. It's just inadequacy across the board. So I have found that if I had to summarize it, people's second biggest fear is fear of rejection. The biggest fear is fear of inadequacy. The issue with rejection is rejection confirms that perceived inadequacy that they feel. I am in fear. I am not good enough. And so this is what happens with the clients I work with, at least. They walk around every single day looking at that, about how they're not good enough at this, at this, at this, at this. Leads to depression, loneliness. Spending more time online is actually going to increase the loneliness that you experience. Great story about this one. Had a fellow coworker, very gifted therapist, very, very gifted, 5-year postdoc, additional school, like special type of therapist, who came to me one day, was feeling a little bit off. I picked up on it. And I said, what's going on? And she felt that she was growing apart from her friends and she felt down about that. So I inquired, okay, well, what gives you that impression? And she said, well, she went onto social media and saw they all went out to dinner together and they didn't invite her. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that's actually a valid example. Maybe there's more to that story, but I could see why you would feel that way. So we start to talk it out, flesh it out some more details. And then it's just nagging in the back of my mind. I'm like, something's off here. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And I'm like, when was this? And she said when it was. And I said, wait, weren't you in Thailand? And she said, yes. And I said, were they with you in Thailand? No, they were in New Jersey. Did they know you were in Thailand? Yes. And so I said, all right, I just want to make sure I got this. So you feel that they don't like you because they didn't invite you to a dinner when they knew you were over in Southeast Asia and that there was no way you could possibly make it? She said, yes. I said, okay. This is not just youth and young adults. This one happens too. This one happens to adults as well. You know, you see other people that are out to dinner, going to an event, et cetera, and it can bring up that feeling of being left out. Adults are usually a little bit better at processing it. But again, a very gifted therapist got tripped up on that herself. And it's happened to me as well. And I could write a book on this stuff. And it still happens to me occasionally. So when I think about like a 14-year-old, not good. I don't think they're going to be able to process that one so good. Anxiety, depression used to be the leading cause of college students to go to counseling centers. It's now the second leading cause. It's actually anxiety is number 1 now. This one's great. 62% of college students report they feel overwhelm and anxiety that impacts their ability to function in life. And that's just in 18 months. If we go out to like 2 years, it's about 80% of them. So the anxiety rates are just absolutely through the roof at this point. It's insane how high the anxiety rates are. And that's usually a combination of a couple of things. One, they don't have a core group that they actually are really connected to. They compare themselves to other people. They think that there's something inadequate or inferior about themselves. And they're very terrified that other people are going to discover out who they really are. And so they connect without connecting. They engage without engaging. And then something happens, usually the rigors of the academics, that trips them up. And then it's just a series of dominoes at that point. Then it's a friend that, you know, doesn't respond to them in a particular day. And it just sets it into motion. So we have doubled the resources on college campuses, therapists, psychologists. We've doubled it in the past 5 years. And yet the wait list to get an appointment has actually increased. So if you are at Rutgers, we've got help for you. You just need to anticipate your crisis 8 weeks in advance so that you can make your appointment 8 weeks in advance. So 8 weeks from now, when you need it, you have your appointment. If you're at Michigan State, you can do the same thing. You just need to do it 10 to 12 weeks in advance. We cannot keep up with it. Self-esteem. I love that quote. Heard it twice from my client. 2 different clients. Everyone looks like they're having the best day of their life every day, all the time. Tuck syndrome, which we talked about. So Chatham Middle School is a school that's located around the corner from me. It's located in Morris County, which is the top 10 wealthiest county in the United States. The average median household income in Chatham is about $135,000. And the school, the middle school and the high school, are usually rated as, if not top 3, always top 5 schools in the state of New Jersey, public schools. They have resources available. So just an ideal environment, theoretically. We surveyed their high school students, there's 1,200 of them. 100 of them said they seriously contemplated suicide in the previous year. Went to the middle school. 51 of them said they contemplated suicide in the previous year. These are kids that come from incredibly privileged backgrounds, who theoretically have all of the resources available to them, who go to top schools in New Jersey and live in really a very safe, supportive, wealthy town. And their rates are through the roof. One of the big contributors to that is the pressure that they face. That is a significant contributor. The other thing, though, and this is across like most of these schools at this point, is that if you practice being false 8 hours a day, it becomes very difficult to accept who you actually are. And so it's that dichotomy, who I feel I am versus who I present myself to be to everybody else. And if you only knew who I was, you wouldn't accept me. So I can't let you see me. Self-esteem, decimated by social media. Suicide. Okay. Well, for teenage girls, it's the highest it's been in 40 years. It's actually doubled in the past 5 years, the rate. Boys, they've only gone up by 30%. So what does this look like? Okay, for boys in the United States, it's about 13.5 per 100,000. So, 14 teenage boys are going to kill themselves per 100,000. And for girls, it's doubled. It's up in like the 4.5 range at this point. It's horrific, absolutely horrific. So what can actually help? It seems so simple, but Optum's razor is sometimes the simplest solution. Actually, the majority of the time, the simplest solution is the best solution. It's a combination of things on this slide: sleep, meditation, exercise, connection, kindness, and gratitude. We've looked at this extensively since 2017. We've looked at all of these. There's even a course on it from Yale, The Psychology of Well-Being. Fantastic course. The research on it, I checked all of the research. It's legit. So sleep, we want to go for 8 hours, no less than 7. Sleep hygiene is incredibly important. And this is why one of the first interventions I do is I have parents remove the devices from the bedroom. Get the phone, get the laptop, get the tablet, get the television. They do not belong in the bedroom. It's just low-hanging fruit. It's one of the easiest things to do. I also am a proponent of, when working with families, that mom and dad have to follow similar rules. Whatever the relationship might be, if there is another partner, I think that it is important to the family to have rules that they all adhere to. I love the rule, if we're having dinner, no devices at the table. I remember when I was a kid, which seems a long time ago, but I guess in the scheme of things, wasn't too long ago. Dinner was about the family sitting together and talking, and people inquiring about, how was your day? What did you learn? Afterwards, we all, spread out into our different directions, but at least once a day, people were sitting down and engaging in conversation. It's hypocritical for parents to be like to the kids, you can't have those devices at the dinner table, and then the parents are using it. The parents were taking their legs out from underneath them at that point. So let's put a pause on that stuff. Meditation, you do not have to become a yogi. The key is 10 minutes. 10 minutes a day decreases depressive symptoms by about 50%. 10 minutes a day, do it for a month, come back and tell me it didn't help. It increases with it helps increase emotional resiliency, processing, there's no downside to it, all upside. Nice and simple too. Exercise. A number of studies have shown that exercise is actually more effective in treating depression than pharmacological interventions. Exercise is more effective for certain people, or more effective than antidepressants. The key for that, pick something that you like 3 to 5 times per week, 30 to 45 minutes total each time. I cannot stand being in an office, so I do the majority of my therapy sessions with clients at this point outside, walking on different hiking trails in the area. Number one, they don't like to be in the office. They're youth and young adults. They like to move around. I'm very casual, and I know that at least once a week, I'm getting them outside, hitting that quota of 45 minutes of exercise. So that is key. And this is not just for kids as well. This is for adults. Like y'all, if you employed these techniques in your life, would experience an increase in the quality of your life. Connection, 30 minutes a day. Connection does not occur via social media. At this point, it can be a phone call, it can be a Zoom, but there's also people usually that are in our lives that we can connect with, that are with us. And so I love it when spouses at nighttime like actually connect with their partner. Relationships are difficult. Relationships require maintenance. And usually if we have a family, one of the first things to go is the relationship between the partners, because they focus their energy on the kids and their energy on their professional careers. But the best investment you could make would be into yourself. The second best investment would be into the relationship with your partner. You take care of those two, the kids and professional life are going to improve. So connection, 30 minutes a day, call up an old friend, call a new friend, connect with somebody. Kindness. So this was a really series of fascinating studies. Doing random acts of kindness for people. And you didn't have to pay for their college. You didn't have to buy them a car. A little thing. Or random act of kindness that necessarily wasn't directed towards anybody in particular. I pick up discarded trash when I go hiking with people. It's not for a specific person. It benefits everybody. It benefits nature. Little things. Making somebody lunch, making somebody dinner, thanking somebody if they've done that for you. Acknowledgement. This was like for mild to moderate depression, 40% reduction in symptoms. If you engaged in 3 random acts of kindness, again, they could be very small things, on a daily basis for 30 days. Gratitude. Ooh. So the research on this one's still ongoing, but I have a pretty extensive background with substance use disorder, AA, Al-Anon for, I don't know, over a decade at this point. And one of the core components of both of those programs, one of the tools that they use is gratitude lists. It's very easy to forget all of the good things that we actually do have going for us. And so the key to gratitude, this will absolutely improve the quality of your life. 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes to sit down and write out, but really think about, what am I grateful for? And what happens usually when I have clients do this exercise, the first week, they find themselves starting to repeat the same things. Okay, I'm grateful that I have a house, that I have food on the table, that I have a job, that I have parents, whatever. The key is to actually sit there and think about, why am I grateful for those things? 5 minutes. So if you said, I'm going to have a very busy day, or I'm really going to dedicate myself to self-care today, or I'm going to have my child dedicate themselves to self-care and crush out this list, how long would it take if they did everything? Exercise is, 30 minutes. Meditation, put another 10 minutes on that. So we're at 45 minutes or 40 minutes. Add gratitude. Now we're up to 45 minutes. Kindness could be opening the door for somebody. So that's not going to take much time. Connection, that should be enjoyable. That's 30 minutes, and then sleep. So it actually doesn't take much time to do these things. It will dramatically improve the quality of life, though. And so that's my stuff for right now with the pandemic. I also even before the pandemic started, I was doing all of those things with my clients. One of the first questions I ask them is, talk to me about the quality of your sleep. Talk to me about your sleep routine. I've never seen a problem made better by lack of sleep. That's a great place to start. I have them engage in journaling. I have them engage in meditation. I have them engage in exercise. Simple, non-sexy things that just have been proven to be effective. We're always trying to come up with something new, when in reality, there's certain things that have just worked for a very long time. And they might not be new and shiny, but they work. So this is my contact information. Y'all can feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, if you want to know more about research, if there's something I can help with. I have extensive experience with substance use disorder, working with families that struggle with addiction, the issues that youth and young adults face. I go all over the country speaking on that topic. It could be social media. I'm devastated in video games. If you have questions about it, I probably know about it. If you want to talk about the older adult population, which just really does not get the attention that they deserve, the population that's struggling the most would be the youth and young adults. Second most is going to be the older adult population. I have extensive information on what's going on with them. And then we got my sandwich generation in between that's taking care of kids and then trying to take care of their parents while balancing a professional career. That's brutal. So I think I'm done talking for now, but if you all have questions, like, fire away or comments.
I'm just thinking about how devastating it's going to be when this generation becomes parents, and
Oh my God.
how that is going to impact their ability to be a present, responsive, nurturing, parent to their child, and how that's going to impact attachment and family. And I guess like my head just keeps going there. Like, I was laughing when you said like the average age is like 15 for a child to get a cell phone or whatever. I work with 6-year-olds here. I would say half of our like first and second graders have a cell phone. So that scares me. Many of the crisis calls we have to make are triggered by children in crisis because their cell phone was taken away, because
That's
they
right.
lost the game of Fortnite, because their Xbox broke. And so I guess just thinking about all of this, and with regard to video game use too, is like looking for ways to help educate parents about the damage and the dangers of video games and cell phone use and technology. And I have trouble finding information about concrete strategies to help like decrease the frequency and the addiction. It's an addiction. So I don't know, I can email you and ask if maybe
Please.
you have some resources that could be helpful. But again, talking out loud, it seems impossible for me to help because parents have the same problem as the children. And as much as they want their children to change, and in my experience, in most cases, the parents are unwilling to make the changes or unable to make the changes for themselves. So I just feel like I just keep hitting a wall. Not to be negative, but it's scary. And now, like more than ever, children and parents and families are on their devices, throughout the pandemic. So I'd love to get more information from you if you have it about, strategies to help wean families off
Yeah,
phones.
definitely reach out to me and I'll give you some stuff. But something that popped into my mind just now, the way I do it actually is when I'm working with a family system, the system has to change. It can't just be the kids. And you're spot on. The parents are struggling with the same issue as the kids, which makes it really unique. The way I go at it in a non-threatening way is I focus on actually working with the parents about like, hey, your child is struggling with this. So this is what we have to do with your child. But to support what's going on with your child, you have to make that change as well. So it takes the onus off of me saying, you have the same exact problem. It's like, no, I need you to change so that we can help your child change. But yeah, absolutely. Definitely reach out to me and I will give you everything I got.
Do you feel like also the phone, the tablets, the video games in many ways has become a critical babysitter for families, and
100%.
that everyone, all these families are so overextended in their own lives that they just, the time investment in having that kind of more interpersonal relationship, they don't see how that, it's just so easy to throw them in front of a phone or a game. It's a babysitter that's a little cheaper than getting.
Absolutely. And I'm okay with that concept, but with limitations in place. And so when we are consistently doing that, but letting the kids self-regulate about how much time they're going to spend on it, that's where we really get into the danger zone with it. I can't come down and chastise parents who were pulled in so many directions. We're like, listen, I need 5 minutes to myself, so I give it to my kid, so I can just have 5 minutes. I absolutely understand. I could empathize with that. What sort of strategies can we put into place to reduce your stress level, free up more time for you, so that you don't feel as propelled to do that? And again, I'm not an all or nothing. I'm not anti-social media. I'm just more focused on smart, educated social media usage, which would be 30 minutes a day or less. For video games, it would be absolutely less than 13 hours a week. The concern part is that when research we just did, 4% of youth in the US said they play at least 50 hours a week. And most of them are well north of that 13, which puts them into the danger zone for video game addiction. So we can use these things, but it's like psychoeducation. Let the parents know this is what it's actually going on. Like, this is the parameters we have to abide by if we want to be safe for your child. And then how can we do this? So yes, I get it.
Question for you. You had mentioned that your hesitancy at this point in writing a book about social media addiction stems from lawsuit and all of that. How did you get around that? Or, I would imagine that happened also with the gaming industry.
Yes. So I was just ignorant at the time. And so I wrote it and published it, and it was published. If I had known in advance that, hey, if you do this, these companies can come after you, I wouldn't have done it. But now that I'm aware of that, and I didn't get sued for my video game book, but it's just, I've seen this happen to a number of fellow authors at this point, that you can sue somebody for good reason, bad reason, or no reason at all. And I would win, but it would decimate my personal life. And it would cost an insane amount of money. And it would be me going against institutions that have limitless money. So it's like, you know what? I don't think I want to pursue that fight. So I do this. All right, anybody else?
So on what you were just talking about, I can't remember the name of it, but my daughter and I watched on Netflix a documentary.
Correct.
With a lot of those people, I can't remember the name of the documentary, but with a lot of those people who had since left the companies of Facebook and Instagram and a lot of other ones, it was frightening watching it.
Yes.
It was absolutely frightening to hear the things that they were part of and that they walked away from, and the statistics and all that. It was unbelievable. So I can't remember the name of it, but it's a Netflix documentary. And the other thing, the Yale course that you were talking about on happiness,
Yep.
that's offered for free if anyone is ever interested in it. I signed up for it. I've yet to complete it, but it's a you can go and online and sign up for it for free. And she also does a podcast, which is excellent.
Yes, absolutely.
This lab, I think Lori Santos is her name.
Yes, that's right.
So just throwing that out there, that those are two things I came across during the beginning of the pandemic, listening to different podcasts like that.
For anyone that's interested, the course is called The Psychology of Wellbeing. And it's on, I want to say, it's Coursera or something, Courtesa.
Coursera or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. I went through it myself. And so I was like, okay, she knows what she's talking about with this research as well. It's
very interesting. And her podcast is great. It's called The Happiness Lab.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there.
Very good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Certainly, we'll hang back a little bit if anyone has any questions, or clearly if Andrew has to go, but we'll hang back. Andrew, thank you so much for taking time and for sharing your research with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining on with us today.